And we've all been teenagers. If a girl had me in her room and was like, watch me sleep, like I'm just creepy enough to do it.
Sure.
And I'll do that shit for hours. I will watch you sleep. I'll do that now.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John...
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love when growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I'm one of your three hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Freddy Lyons.
I'm your boyfriend now, Raj.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week the audience selects from 4 movie choices that we then break out our race car VHS tape rewinders and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes at the end of each episode. The three of us provide you with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective bums. So thanks so much for listening. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. And check out our other podcasts, Shat on TV and Show Spoilers. With that being said, Big D, what is the movie and theme we are doing tonight?
So this is part 2 of our 80s horror movie / Halloween week. We did Poltergeist earlier in the week, and it was so close with Nightmare on Elm Street, we decided to do it as a second half, a double feature, and woo! I got to tell you, Nightmare on Elm Street wasn't what I remembered, and it makes me respect Poltergeist even that much more.
Oh, I completely agree. This movie is atrocious. I like you, I watched it during the day because that's how Raj has to watch scary movies. I have to watch them during the day, so I can go to sleep at night. But this is a movie that I could watch at night by myself, and it's so laughable that I would not be scared at all. This is a terrible movie. It's a nightmare of a movie.
I got to disagree with both of you guys. I thought this was a great movie, and this brought me back to what I wanted to see out of a Halloween movie. Poltergeist was an utter waste of time. This got into the kind of gory slasher flick that I love, so I was very pleased.
Well, A Nightmare on Elm Street is a 1984 American slasher film written and directed by Wes Craven and the first of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. The film stars Heather Langenkamp, John Saxon, Ronnie Blakely, Amanda Weiss, Zoo Garcia, Robert Englund, and Johnny Depp. In his film debut, the plot revolves around 4 teenagers who are stalked and killed in their dreams and thus killed in reality by Freddy Krueger. The teenagers are unaware of the cause of this strange phenomenon, but their parents hold a dark secret from long ago. I actually didn't know about the inspiration for this movie, but in my research, I found out that this was an actual thing that happened in the 70s. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I did. It was Wes Craven was trying to come up with a concept for a horror movie, and he was out in L.A., and he had read, I believe it was in the L.A. Times, that there was some immigrant families who had come over from Southeast Asia, a few refugees who had survived the genocide in Laos and Cambodia. And the children were suffering these, vivid nightmares. They were refusing to sleep. The family was concerned. They took them to doctors. The kids were doing everything they could, just like in the movie, pounding coffee. And finally, when they sedated the child, put him to sleep, in the middle of the night, they heard a scream. Family came down, and the child was dead.
Crazy.
So Wes Craven took that idea and said, wouldn't it be great to see what was going on inside, someone's dreams that was so terrifying that would make them do everything they could to stay awake?
And what's interesting about that is that one of the things people never really talk about with Freddy Krueger is that win or lose, you still lose. So like if you manage to just stay awake forever, your health would suffer so greatly that you would die anyway, or you'd make a mistake in life that would, have a catastrophic effect. So it's really interesting that I would love to see somebody get pushed to that point where he never got them, but the lack of sleep did.
Yeah, but you got to figure, if you're watching Jason, you might get a chance to escape him. All Freddy's got to do is wait you out. You're eventually going to fall asleep. You're going to lose your edge. And he's going to get you. And also, you know when you're in the woods with Jason. With Freddy, you don't always know. Am I in the classroom? Am I in the boiler room? Am I awake? Am I asleep?
I can hear you changing your tune already, Big D. You love this movie.
No, I never said it was a bad movie. It's a different movie than Poltergeist, and I loved it as a kid. So no, my tone is not set. My wipe is still, it's flexible.
You have a flexible wipe. No, but like I feel like what I remember about this movie is it did similar things for sleep for children of our age growing up that Jaws did for like going swimming in the ocean. Like kids were afraid to fucking fall asleep.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember as a kid, every time I saw these movies, I think I started at part 3, and I think I was like 9 years old or something like that. But I would have trouble falling asleep afterward, and it wasn't even because it wasn't like I'm so terrified. It was really like I'm smart enough to not fall asleep. Like I know what happens, and it would drive my mom nuts.
These kids, like we always talk about, where were you when
Right.
you first saw this movie? I don't know how I saw this, so young. I was 11 years old when it came out. I saw it in the theaters. How did I get into an R-rated movie? I don't know. Nobody raised a concern. I had the actual movie poster on my wall, which was terrifying. I loved this movie so much, and at the time, it scared me, and I think it started my love affair with horror films, but I don't know if it's truly the same today, but I respect what they were trying for.
Yeah, I've talked about this before. I've actually never seen the movie. This was the first time I actually saw the movie from start to finish. But neighborhood kids used to sing the song to me and make me cry. Like they would, the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, 3, 4, better lock your door, 5, 6, grab your crucifix. Like I feel like you sing that to like a 6 or a 7-year-old kid who's good at spelling bees and can't run very fast because he has kind of a gland disorder,
Extra girth.
Yeah, extra girth. He's a husky boy, and that was my childhood. I feel like every time I would see this movie on the rental shelves of Blockbuster Video, a little pea would come out of my britches.
It is interesting to think that at this point in the franchise, it was the original, and they really were trying to go for a slasher flick. And if you're one of the kids who picked up on it a little bit later, like I did after Nightmare 3, at that point, it had gotten really, really goofy. So, I mean, you talk about this being goofy now. At least here, they were trying to make an attempt at kind of a gore fest and have a little bit of scary fun. But by the time they got into 4 or 5, it was really, really just getting silly at that point. So I'm glad that we went back to the roots here and didn't pick a later installation of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, and also, we're going to play the trailer here in a minute. You got to remember, back then, Freddy's iconic today, but at the time, no one knew who he was, so they didn't even include him really in the marketing pieces. You see the glove on the poster, but the trailer alludes to, what is it? Something's going to get you. You're going to die. They don't tell you. So I think they did a really effective job of the way they introduced a character and made him something we've never seen before.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, Big D, roll the trailer.
The kids of Elm Street don't know it yet, but something is coming to get them.
There's something out there, isn't there?
We just see cuts happen.
What did that, Lieutenant?
I don't know.
What has the coroner got to say? He's in the jar and puking since he saw it.
They're gonna kill me for sure.
Did you do it?
There was somebody else there.
He was locked in a room with a girl who went in alive and came out in a rubber bag.
No one knows where it came from or who it will visit next.
Nancy? There's something wrong with you. You're imagining things.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Do you believe in the boogeyman?
No.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
No!
She's the only one who can stop it. If she fails,
I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
no one will survive. From Wes Craven, director of The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, a new masterpiece in fantasy terror, Nightmare on Elm Street.
All right, 15-year-old Tina Gray is stalked through a boiler room and attacked by a disfigured man wearing a blade-fixed glove. She awakens from the nightmare, but her mother points out 4 mysterious slashes on her nightgown. The following morning, Tina is consoled by her best friend Nancy Thompson and her boyfriend Glen Lance.
So the movie opens up and we're watching the glove being constructed. And again, like Big D was saying, if you take yourself back to that moment where you've never seen Freddy Krueger before and you see this glove being put together, how cool would that moment be? It must have been amazing to see that thing built for the first time in a theater. It's late at night, you're with your friends and going, what the hell is this? And then you realize what it is, and it's just opened up this entire world to you. I felt that moment, and it was just a great reveal.
Yeah, I've always been handy with creating things and building. As a kid, I tried to replicate the glove. I went to the hardware store and bought the copper pipe, but I lacked the correct tools. So my homemade one, and of course I'm lefty, so I had to switch it up, was terrible. But how my parents didn't find this thing hidden in my room and really start to worry.
That would have been just nothing but endless child psychology visits for you.
When you think about it, though, it's an incredibly impractical murder weapon. Like, you're better off with just a knife or a hatchet, a chainsaw, pretty much anything that you see in normal horror movies. This thing it's really impractical as far as attacking goes. You're kind of scratching at people with just one hand, and you see that in Freddy's attacks. They're just kind of goofy looking.
But in my research for the movie, when they first put it on Robert Englund, they didn't realize that the knives were so long that when he kind of reached back, he actually cut his own forearm with the blades. So they had to be more careful with it. But I don't care whether or not it's realistic or it's practical. This thing is probably the most iconic, murder weapon, or Jason's machete. But you show this to anyone and they'll know what it is, even if they haven't seen the film.
Well, one of the things I do like, you talk about practical. One thing I do like about going back and watching these 80 slasher films is that they used practical effects, and you have to, give your hands up to these low budget horror movies because they're really inventive with how they stretch their budget and what they use to create some of these effects. And I really enjoyed like the face coming through the ceiling, the steps later on in the movie as she's trying to, escape Freddy, that they use pancake mix for that. I think they spent a ton of money on creating blood. I think they had like almost 500 gallons of blood were used throughout this entire movie. You just don't see that anymore. Everything is CGI. Even in the remake that they did in 2010, they used CGI to enhance Jackie Earle Haley's face, who he's the one who plays Freddy in the remake. But this one, it's all practical effects, and I love that.
And this wouldn't really be a classic slasher flick if it didn't have that combination of cool practical effects, lots of gore, with just horrible acting. You mentioned in the opening, Raj, that Tina is supposed to be 15. This actress does not look 15. And I was like, man, Tina, she's kind of foxy. And then I realized, she's supposed to be a 15-year-old girl. Like, she doesn't have a driver's license. But a couple weeks ago, we watched Porky's, and we're kind of knocking on that. This makes Porky's acting seem incredible. And I want to say that Nancy's mom, Marge, is the worst of all. She is unbearable in this movie. If you watch this movie, there are a lot of people who went on to have some pretty great acting careers. Marge, you'll notice, did not.
Do you think that is a knock on Wes Craven? And he's a fairly young director at this given time. But like, if you don't have a good director, you could have the best actors, and you're not going to get the performances that you want. And I'll point to Star Wars prequels, George Lucas. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson's in that fucking movie, and he's fucking terrible.
Nah, the whole point of a slasher flick is you use basically your entire budget on the effects, right? You want all the gore you want. So they only had $1.8 million to make this movie, and they had actually a pretty large cast. And they had Johnny Depp in it. This was his first big role, as you mentioned. Other familiar faces in the movie were Lynn Shay, who was the landlord in Kingpin. I think you knocked something loose, Tiger. And also, Charles Fleischer is the doctor in this movie who went on to be the voice of Roger Rabbit and several other characters in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, along with a pretty successful comedy career. So I don't think that they actually got a pretty good cast considering, but the supporting cast was a little weak.
Well, all right. So the father who plays the father of Nancy is actually, if you've ever seen Enter the Dragon, which is one of the it's one of the best martial art films of all time. It's Bruce Lee's first American movie. Unfortunately, would be his last complete movie because he died during the filming of his next one. But John Saxon, who looks strikingly like Michael Ironside, who's the sergeant in what was
Starship
the movie?
Troopers.
Starship Troopers, right. I texted you guys, I was like, oh shit, Michael Ironsides, and then I realized it was John Saxon. But that's my point, is that you got this great fucking cast, but Wes doesn't get good performances out of him, so I blame the actor on that. What's interesting, though, is the role of Nancy, who he didn't want to be a Hollywood role. That's why he went to Heather Langenkamp. She beat out more than 200 actresses, including Demi Moore, Courtney Cox, Tracy Gold, and Jennifer Grey, who would have been far superior in a role like this.
I don't think that it was Wes's fault. You had a young cast who wasn't that experienced, and the budget affected it. You couldn't do reshoots. You didn't have time to come in and rehearse, to block the shots. You just kind of threw them out there, and what you got, you got. You can see how thin the budget is by the special effects. Some of them are dynamite. You have Tina rolling around the ceiling, dragging blood, looks great. But then you have Freddy with the Stretch Armstrong. Like, it looks like he's got, like, he has mop handles in his sweater,
dance?
and he's kind of wiggling.
That chase dance that he's doing?
Yeah, so this was New Line Cinema's last attempt to become a viable studio, and that budget did not allow for rehearsals or anything that would have made it a better movie.
Yeah, but the flexing wall effect was cool. But again, they made really weird choices, like you said, like the dancing Freddy. And I get that it's supposed to be in a nightmare. It's supposed to be in a dream sequence. Reality is not supposed to, be the same as when they're in the real world, right? They're really going for a dream world effect. That being said, usually when stuff is done that way, they put like a little lens flare on it, or they try and keep the audience maybe even guessing a little bit. But I don't know, for someone who experiences night terrors, I didn't feel like I was watching a dream sequence. Does that make sense? Or I wasn't watching a nightmare sequence. Like, Gene, do you have nightmares? Do you have night terrors? And if so, like, how real are they to you?
I barely even dream, but I used to have recurring nightmares. And I think the key that they were going for here was really an attempt to make you not know when you were in a dream and when you were. So basically blurring that line between reality and the dream world, I think, was essential, because you're not supposed to know until, like, you're supposed to get little tells that tell you, like a pebble stuck in a window. Like, that's something that tells you, okay, now you're in the dream world. If they made it too obvious, I think it would have been really easy for the audience and not as fun.
And I think the blurring of the two worlds, the best scene for me was Nancy falling asleep in class. And there's a student who's reading Shakespeare. And as she comes to, you see the body bag. And that shit was creepy enough. And then they pan back and you see the student who's reading, and all of a sudden his voice is really low. So really cheap way to kind of show that line. But there's also other times that you're not really sure. And it adds to that fear. You never know when you're safe.
Yeah, but you see, that's the point that I'm making, is had they kept on with those small little tells, like the student making the deep voice with the Shakespeare, had they kept that on, that would have been scarier, in my opinion, than dancing, flailing, long-armed Freddy Krueger, chasing her around incessantly without any kind of consequence. This movie, again, it's so uneven to me. There's solid scenes like that, and then there's the rest of it is pretty terrible. But do you dream, Big D? Do you have nightmares?
I generally don't remember my dreams, but there's a few times that I've had really bad fevers or been sick, and you have those crazy ass dreams that you're in a dream and it's just vivid, and it's, a lot of times I get lost when I have nightmares.
Right.
It's either I can't find Emma, I lose my wife, I'm trying to find things through a maze. So I've never been, chased down by a killer, but it's more my loss of control. I like to be detailed, structured, and my terrors involve mayhem and loss and losing track of things.
Right. I have so many bad nightmares that, like, I wake up, I don't know where I am, and I'm also a sleep talker. So there have been multiple people who I've slept with that, like, they're like, hey, wake up, because
Liar.
I don't know. No, I swear to God, like, I'm a sleep talker. A lot of times
you slept with multiple people.
I know. Humble brag. But so I have really bad night terrors, and a lot of it stems from, if you listen to the Poltergeist, my grandparents' house, there's a vortex, I feel, where all the spirits come out of, and I still have nightmares about that house. I've also had what they call, like, the sleep paralysis, where you wake up from a nightmare and you can't move. And that's the creepiest thing. Have you guys ever experienced the sleep paralysis? Oh, Boy, that is terrible. Like you're awake, your eyes are moving, you're trying to talk, you're trying to speak, you're trying to yell out, and you can't.
So yeah, the science behind that is actually that all the neurochemicals that are dumped to keep your body from bouncing all around when you're sleeping, they have not left your system. So they're still in a full dump. Your body hasn't come out of like stasis, but your brain wakes up, and it's a shitty place to be.
Yeah. Well, later, Nancy and Glenn sleep at Tina's following her mother's out-of-town departure. The sleepover is interrupted by Tina's boyfriend, Rod Lane. Falling asleep, Tina sees the man and runs, awakened by Tina's thrashing. Rod witnesses her being fatally slashed by an unseen force. He flees as Nancy and Glenn find Tina mistakenly blaming Rod. Nancy tells her father, Lieutenant Don Thompson, of Tina's death.
So yeah, you see this scene, and it's hard to blame anybody but Rod. So this guy who carries around a switchblade, he's like this creepy greaser who apparently did not get the memo that it's 1984. He's coming over to like help comfort her. He basically is like half raping her up the stairs. They get to her room, they go to bed. People hear them boning all night, all this screaming. Which, by the way, teenagers are not that loud when they're having sex. I'm sorry, but we were all, I think, to a T when we were having sex as teens. We were very, very quiet. Mm-hmm. You don't really develop that until you're like 20s, and then by your 30s, you're just hollering.
Well, I'm a ninja. I'm a ninja when I have sex. Very quiet.
I am definitely not. But the point about all this is Rod goes in there, there's blood all over the place, and they come into the room, and how do you not blame anybody but him? He knows he is in big trouble, and I think that part's plausible where he just gets the fuck out of that room and goes into hiding.
Dude, he's fucked. He's got the trifecta. Looks like he's 30 years old. He's Latino. Nancy hears him screaming and fighting with her. Oh, get out of here. Get out of here. I'm going to do this. The blood is everywhere. And he runs. This dude, I'm surprised this was not death by cop, that the police did not shoot him.
Hold on.
Rod is fucked.
Where did you get that he's Latino? His name is Rod Lane.
Did you look at him? I can tell.
Oh my.
Hold on. The actor's name is Garcia. So I don't think I'm going at a stretch.
It doesn't matter. The character's name is Rod Lane.
Maybe he was adopted.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
I am right. He is a Cuban-born actor. Yes.
Next thing you're going to tell me is Poe Dameron's Latino as well.
This is just Raj. He's been out of Florida for too long. He doesn't remember.
Well, all right. So I get why Rod would flee, but like you have two other teenagers in the house there. You have your friends there. Why aren't you like trying to go get them? But even before that, even before the slashing, why aren't Johnny Depp and his girlfriend banging as well?
Because morality sucks.
No,
it's really, that's literally what he says. He's laying there on the couch listening to them go at it. He goes, "Oh, morality sucks."
Yeah. No, but Nancy says, "We're here to support Tina." And poor Johnny, as soon as he hears them having sex, he should have looked at Nancy and been like, "Hey, I don't think she needs our support right now. We're in a house alone. Let's do what teenagers do."
Nancy's not that kind of girl. Look at her.
She's got her crucifix.
Look at those bangs. Yeah.
You said look at her. Did they not have hair and makeup on set? She has a giant white head, like right on her forehead.
Does she really?
When she goes to the police station after the murder, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. Get some cover up. Just, dab it.
But, here's the thing is in the dream sequences, it's not there.
Yeah. Because that's
maybe that's the tell. It's like Inception. the white head.
It's the top.
It's the top. It's the top. When the white head is there, it's the real world. When it's smooth, it's the dream state.
Getting back to the Rod thing, though, Raj, I want to point this out after we watched Poltergeist. Notice what they did after there was a dead body in the house. They called the cops. That's what you do. Right? I was very proud of them for calling the police in this movie several times, even though the police don't really help that much. At least after this paranormal event, the cops were called. So take that, Poltergeist.
Well, there's a couple of things. Like Tina's, like you talk about the effects and you talk about the cops, and it tried to make logical sense, but you have a death, right? So of course they're going to call someone. In the case of Poltergeist, they had a missing child, which. Again, I tried to poke holes. I still think that Big D, if Emma was lost in his television set, he would not call the cops first. I really truly believe that he would call one of us first, and then I would call my family's medium, the parapsychologist.
If there were 3 construction workers ogling his child and then she went missing that night, I don't think he'd be looking in the TV. I think he'd be calling the cops. And you know, again, getting out of that surreal part of this movie, though, we got to get down to the roots of slasher movies and talk about the would you go outside or not.
Right.
I'm a grown man. If I'm standing there outside my back door and someone's going, Gene, I'm not fucking going outside. But I thought about that for a while and I go, wait, she's in a dream. And sometimes you don't always have control in the dream. It doesn't always make sense. So it's plausible.
Well, no, it's true because like not so long it was probably about a year ago around Halloween. Your truck got broken into and you were watching the people break into your truck from your like the window, like 10 feet away. And you have a gun. You own guns for self-protection. You called the cops, but did not go out there and confront them who, you know, were stealing your vehicle. And they were the slowest people in the world, you described it as.
Yeah, and if they were out there whispering, Gene, I especially would not go outside.
Yeah, these kids were braver than I was. I was afraid to go down my basement and it wasn't even haunted. Stay where it's somewhat safe.
One of the cool scenes about the movie, and God, I'm fucking talking myself into a lower score here, but the murder scene looked pretty good, right? When she's going up the wall.
Oh yeah,
great. That was straight out of Poltergeist. I mean, they had similar scenes. I don't think they were stolen, but I like how they're, you know, Freddy is the invisible force taking her up and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was good use of effects, good use of budget.
It was a lot like Poltergeist, but so much more violent. I mean, it looked painful. It looked horrifying, and I thought that was really great. Again, the pebble stuck in the window. You mentioned the ceiling overhead, and also just the slash across the belly. Like, obviously, you knew it was not, you know, real flesh, but the fact that we got to see some blood was very gratifying. I really enjoyed the first kill of the movie. I thought Freddy did a pretty good job. I'll give him a 8 out of 10.
Yeah, what makes it better for Poltergeist, in my eyes, is that happened to the mom alone. Nobody saw it.
Right.
You see Rod just standing there watching this happen in terror as she's cut open, thrown across the room, and then finally the body flies into him.
Yeah.
It made it much more terrifying.
If only he had 200 cc's of
Thorazine
in his pocket that he could have.
And some roses. Would have been a party.
Who needs Thorazine when you got those tidy whities? He looked good. He was no meat, but he looked pretty good.
But why do you think Nancy's mom divorced her dad? Her dad seemed pretty logical. Like, what the fuck?
No, dude, that's her dad divorcing her mom. She's a fucking lush.
That's true.
Plus, the mom, spoiler alert, we learn at the end, she killed Freddy, right? And she took home, but she took home a trophy. She's obviously mentally deranged. She's keeping it in the house. It's not good for the chief of police to be married to this woman.
It's true. But why? But then why is Nancy fucking living with her? She should be living with dad.
Yeah, the courts are fucked up like that. You know, the court doesn't know that mom is hiding vodka in the linen closet.
Yeah. Also, do you really want to be staying with the guy who you're like, listen, it's really important in 30 minutes. My life could depend on it. You need to be there. And he's like, nah, I don't know. All right, maybe.
Well, the next day, Rod is arrested by Dawn. Despite his pleas of innocence at school, Nancy falls asleep in class and finds the man calling himself Freddy Krueger chasing her in the boiler room. Nancy burns her arm on a piece of pipe and then awakes. She notices the burn mark on her arm and is concerned. At home, Nancy falls asleep in the bathtub and gets drowned by Freddy. Nancy goes to Rod, who tells her what happened to Tina, and Nancy believes Freddy is responsible for Tina's death.
So I love at this point in the movie where it just starts getting surreal. And this is what I really love about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Is just the movies start off like fairly normal and then it just starts getting weirder and weirder. And I love that on the TV news where they just have the victim's arm just like dangling off the stretcher, things start to feel a little bit crazy. But what's really crazy with me is the fucking bathtub scene.
Yeah.
Like if a guy attacks me when I sleep, why the fuck would I take a warm, relaxing bath?
Yeah.
Well, this is the second movie in a row. I don't get it. As a guy, I've never taken a solo bubble bath. Do you guys do that?
Yeah.
No, I'm more into group bubble baths.
Yeah, exactly.
With my buddies.
So the nice thing is, though, as iconic as Nancy's bathtub scene is with the glove coming up, it proved your theory wrong, Gene. Someone in the 80s could comfortably fit in a bathtub.
Well, one of the interesting things is Wes Craven originally wanted the character of Freddy to be a child molester, not just a child killer, but there were so many child molestation charges. Again, this was the 80s. It's when kids would wear their names on T-shirts and candy vans would be at every bus stop abducting and molesting children. So he felt that was, it was too far, so he had to change it to a child killer. But that scene in the bathtub was supposed to be Freddy originally molesting Nancy.
Yeah, and speaking of the bathtub, I just want to point out that Nancy is not a normal-sized person because Johnny Depp is 5'10", and he's a good 6 inches taller than she is. So that woman's like 5'4". If that's what you consider a normal person, then yeah, I guess bathtubs are made for normal people.
But why is Nancy in such a rush to go back to school? Like, and Don, her father's plan is just to follow her. Like, you use me as bait. I'm going to go to school.
If you lived with her mother, you wouldn't be wanting to get out of the house as soon as possible?
That's true.
Yeah. I wish, though, they'd shown some kind of school support, because when I was in high school, actually I was in middle school at that point, we always used to walk to school the same route, and it would cut through this motel that had high hedges. And one day, one of my fellow students disappeared, and they ended up finding her at the end of the day, dead. She was murdered in one of the hotel rooms.
My God.
Yeah, it was rough. I mean,
did they find the guy? Did they or woman or whatever?
They found her in a room. The guy had been doing drugs. It was always this kind of weird situation. Like, she had a lot of money on her. The mother claimed she was going to pay off the rent. So it never really was clear. They arrested somebody and he went to jail, but it was always a lot of mystery around it. But that traumatized me. The school wasn't the same for a good year and a half,
Right.
So Nancy's school, it seems like everybody's over it pretty quick.
Everyone's fine. Yeah, we had guidance and trauma counselors for, like, I remember one of my years in high school, there was actually, I think probably every year of high school, there was like one fatal car accident that would like strike the lives of someone, right? There was, kids drinking and driving, or there was a Old Dixie Highway, and they're expanding it, Big D, behind back where you live by Cypress Creek High School. Anyway,
I don't know.
That 2-lane road was like, there's so many fatalities from kids. They finally had to end it. But like, you're right. There was like grief counselors. You could go and like spend the entire day. There's none of that in this high school. Like, it's just like, fuck Nancy. Who died? Tina died originally. So, yeah, they didn't like Tina. But Nancy has Glen watch over her as she falls asleep. She tries to find Freddy and sees him preparing to kill Rod. He turns his attention on her. She runs and wakes up when her alarm clock goes off. Nancy and Glen go to the jail and discover Rod dead in his cell in an apparent suicide. At Rod's funeral, Nancy's parents become worried when she describes the man in her dreams. Her mother, Marge, takes her to a dream clinic, and in her dream, Nancy's attacked again and grabs Freddy's hat. When the staff wake her up, she has a gash on her arm and Freddy's hat in her possession.
So first of all, Glenn sucks as a wingman in these situations. Like,
awful.
You got one thing to do, which is like, and also like, we've all been teenagers. If a girl had me in her room and was like, watch me sleep, like I'm just creepy enough to do it.
Sure,
and I'll do that shit for hours. I will watch you sleep. I'll do that now. So that bothered me, but also like, where did they find this jail? Because like, I feel like it came from the same year that Rod did. It was like a 1954 jail. It had a very like, a very Andy Griffith show kind of vibe to it.
It's like the single jail in the town. It's like you go down to Tombstone, they got the one jail in the city.
Yeah, and he's like, go get me the key for it. I'm like, what if somebody had an actual fucking situation? There's no surveillance of the cell block. It just seemed like a really rinky-dink kind of town.
So again, this might surprise people. I've never been to jail. So I envision that jails, they don't turn the lights off. It's not like it's an airplane, like, hey, it's time to sleep. Don't they keep the lights on so they can see what's going on and the inmates are always under control? Was this nighttime?
No, they also don't let you go in with your leather jacket into jail. They actually will kind of take most of the stuff on you. They let you keep your shirt and your pants usually, but they're going to empty out all your pockets.
No. Wait, don't they have like lights out? They in Shawshank Redemption, which I imagine every prison is like,
that's prison.
Out.
This is jail. This is jail.
Yeah, prison and jail are different. And I have been locked up, and I've also been on police ride-alongs, and that's just not how it goes down. But again, every town's different. I also don't understand why Rod, as he's getting strangled, like he's about 6 inches from the wall. Like all you got to do there is put your feet up against the wall, buddy, and you're going to be okay. Also, his hands are not bound. Why does he just hold on to the fucking? Why
doesn't he just stand on the sink?
Stand on the sink. But Rod wanted to die. That's a thing.
Are there dream? Is there a place we can go to, like a local university, where they'll strap me in with cathodes and they'll have like an EKG meter measuring my dream sequences on a computer?
Yeah, they do that. There's East Valley Sleep Lab in Arizona. They do that, right? Yeah.
I feel like I should go. I feel like I should go to that.
But that's more for like sleep apnea. That's to see if you're actually getting a deep sleep. They're not going to like decode your dreams. It's not.
Well, she's entering REM right now. She's deep sleeping.
But the limited budget and the effects and the actors, I can get over it. The one thing that's just awful is the synth soundtrack. I felt like I was playing Castlevania on my NES. Like I was fighting the last boss.
I just kept getting visions of Keyboard Cat, like just jamming out, but again, it was iconic in the sense that this sort of refrain and that sort of sound carried on throughout the entire, franchise of Nightmare on Elm Street, and it got a little more sophisticated as time went on.
It's like the worst of John Carpenter, right? But
Yes.
Did you guys know that the Dreamweaver was an inspiration for the synth and for this movie? Dreamweaver.
No, I don't.
Believe you can date me.
I thought it was like one of those default Casio like tempo keys.
Right. But like the parents, she fucking wakes up, she has a hat. How are they in fucking denial still?
She's on video. They're filming the session. You can see her on camera. Besides the fact that the mother knows, hey, that hat belonged to Freddy and I killed him. Maybe let's put some credibility in what Nancy's telling us.
Well, at home, Marge, Nancy's mother, bars the windows and begins drinking heavily, which is probably what I would do.
Smart.
She tells Nancy that Freddy was a child murderer released on a technicality in a form of vigilante justice. All the parents on Elm Street burned him alive. Realizing that Freddy desires revenge, Nancy convinces Glen to help her. She plans to take Freddy into the real world and sets up booby traps in her house. Concerned over her influence, Glen's parents prevent the two from meeting. Glen falls asleep at their appointed hour, and Freddy kills him and releases his blood in a large fountain in his room, which is witnessed by his mother.
So the biggest problem I have with the movie, and I want to reiterate, I like this movie a lot, but Nancy asks, do you know who Freddy Krueger is to her mom? Because obviously there's no internet to do research on. I get that. That's plausible. But this guy was burned alive in their town like less than a generation ago. Yeah. And kids just don't know about it. Like they just know no one talks about it at all.
It was just a few years ago. Like she burned Freddy alive when Nancy was a child. That's what I got of it. So this was like 6-7 years ago.
But you got to realize who's going to tell the story. It wasn't just Nancy's mom who killed. It was all the parents. So if all the parents are involved in this murder, they have an invested interest in keeping this story quiet. You just don't tell. There's no Google. You can't go Google your
Come on. You growing up as a kid, are you telling me there weren't like legends or like stories, rumors that would abound in your neighborhood about certain people? Like we lived on a cul-de-sac and there was always one creepy house in your neighborhood that all the kids had a story about. Are you telling me that wouldn't have happened on Elm Street?
Right, but you would have believed it was fake. You wouldn't have thought it was real.
No, not at all. I believed everything as a child.
Yeah, there was a dude named Ken when I was growing up in my first apartment complex that we lived in Arizona who gave out candy to kids. And he actually was a really nice guy, but not to us. Like to us, he was going to murder and rape us all. Like he was Ken. He just liked to give kids candy, poor guy.
Well, by Craven's account, by Wes Craven's own account, he wrote Freddy Krueger. He named the character Freddy Krueger after his own adolescence bullying. And Craven also did a movie, Last House on the Left, and the villain in that movie is Krug. So apparently, this Craven was abused quite heavily as a child. But like, were you ever abused by a bully? And if so, if you were to write a screenplay, who would be the villain in your movie?
Well, I mean, I actually sought out bullies when I was a kid. That was like one of my that was one of my that was actually one of my hobbies was at school is I'd try to figure out who bullies were and go after them. I think it was like I don't know, some sort of vigilante justice, I guess, or something like that. But I tended to outsize people. Now, not so much, but back then, school was fun for me.
Johnny Depp's T-shirt. Could we get into this? You mentioned, in Poltergeist, we talked about how good that extra large number 65 was. Is Johnny Depp wearing a kid's T-shirt? That was not cool in the 80s, was it?
No, man. I just love the fact that somebody in wardrobe, they're like, all right, we need to let everybody know that Johnny Depp is the jock, okay? Because we're going to make a jock joke later. So give him a jock outfit. And they're like, all right, that's what you got. Like a cut-off mini jersey. There you go. Yeah, because, he was apparently a football player. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But
he looked good.
But yeah, he's very young. He's very skinny, and he's a terrible actor.
He's gotten kind of crazy, yes. But I want to ask you. I thought that Diane from Poltergeist was the worst mom possible. Nancy's mom has given her a run for it. Which one do you think is a worse mom? You have Diane, who's kind of happy with the poltergeists, and then you have Nancy's mom, who's getting drunk when she knows the threat is real.
No, Marge is awful, man. I mean, she's basically locking her kid into the building. She's, getting wasted all the time. Does not believe her when she produces Freddy Krueger's hat. Anytime your mom goes into the furnace and pulls out a glove, that's when it says, "I burned a man alive." Right. That's usually when she's the worst mom.
I'm calling up Dawn and I'm like, "Hey, Dawn, can I come live with you?" But the mom in Poltergeist, again, like in the beginning, you don't know if the spirits are malevolent or not. You don't know. Like, think of like if Freddy was like the kind guy in your apartment complex that would give you candy and then, grabbed you and shoved his knives into your belly. I don't know. Or said weird things like, "I'm your boyfriend now."
Yeah, "I'm your boyfriend now" is one of the more iconic lines of this movie. And I think it really put a twist on things where we started to really get a sense that from his weird running to like his stripy sweater to this line that Freddy's kind of got a sense of humor. He likes to toy with his victims a little bit, and it made the movie fun for me.
But did the preparation montage make sense to you?
No. So I wanted to, I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, the preparation montage, and again, this is 1984, so every movie had to have a montage where you're getting prep for stuff, whether it's Rambo or this. They're loading all sorts of stuff up, and one of the things you see is she's emptying out shotgun shells to fill the gunpowder into a light bulb, which implies that there's a shotgun somewhere around, and why is she not using that?
Well, no, you're assuming that. Dad would probably lock up the shotguns into a safe. He might have had the shells out. But Nancy, she's an evil MacGyver. I got to respect her. She's been pulling out the field manual. She's been studying booby traps. Her plan comes together pretty quick, but it's obvious that Home Alone got half their booby traps from this movie.
Yeah, but they were so much more effective. Her sledgehammer hits him in the stomach. Like, did she think he was 3 feet tall? And then you've got the exploding light. It's just kind of in his vicinity. I think it was more like startling than anything.
Right.
Yeah, setting him on fire seemed to be, rather. She could have just gone straight to the fire thing. Honestly, what was the rest of it about?
But the blood fountain is one of the movie's more iconic scenes. I was waiting for it because I had heard about it. It's good, but it just feels out of place.
How so?
Oh, no, I disagree. It's so great. This was like every time I go to a wedding, I think of this scene, actually, where they got like the chocolate fountain. It's basically the scene. Watching Johnny Depp get sucked into the bed like that. And then they were just like, you know what? I see. I know exactly how this went. They're like, listen, we still got $18,000 left in the budget. What should we do? And they're like, just get all the blood you can buy, and we're going to shoot it straight into the ceiling. And then when it's dripping through the floor, they just put a bucket in the living room.
That's right.
It's perfect.
God, and then the cops, like all of the deputies, are a bunch of knuckleheads. He has one of the best lines in the movie. Well, we don't need a stretcher in there. We need a mop. Yeah. So even they're joking about it, and the poor parents have to stand there and watch their son liquefied just drip down the walls.
Well, alone, Nancy puts Marge to bed and asks Don, who is across the street, to break into the house in 20 minutes. Don, her father. In her sleep, she locates Freddy at the last second and pulls him out of the dream. In the real world, Nancy runs from Freddy, who trips on all the booby traps that she has set. She lights him on fire, locks him in the basement, and rushes to the door for help. The police arrive and then realize Freddy has escaped the basement. In Marge's bedroom, they see a still burning Freddy smother her. After Dawn puts out the fire, Freddy and Marge have vanished. Despite her father's words, Nancy believes she is still in danger.
Nancy's plan really seems flawed here because she's like, Dad, come over. I just set up a fuck ton of booby traps. Please come running in.
Dude, forget about that. Mom is passed out drunk in her bed. What if Mom decides in the middle of the night to get up and go find another bottle of peach schnapps and she sets off those shotgun shells?
But one thing I did like is that the heroine in this movie is a teen girl, and again, we saw a lot of this stuff happening in the early '80s with Ripley and Aliens. Again, I love the fact that they chose to go with the teen girl as a heroine, and it's a brave way to start a franchise. They could have gone with Johnny Depp or Rod or anybody else, or even Dawn made him the hero. Instead, they went with Nancy. I like that.
Well, what cop just says everything's gonna be all right from across the street?
Yeah, you just had somebody liquefied in his room. There's blood all over the place. You're told specifically, if you hear anything, come and tell me from the sheriff. And the deputy just stands out there and goes, "Oh no, it's okay. Just stay barred up in your house where you're screaming for help."
Forget about just that it's another house. That's your boss's daughter's house. The chief of police said, "Hey, my daughter's in there." I'm going to always err on the side of caution. When I see a little bit of smoke in the house, I'm fucking getting the cavalry. I'm calling the police. I'm calling the fire department, paramedics, everything. But Freddy, you mentioned that he's different than any other killers we've had before. I like it. You always had Jason, who was a bigger guy, or killers were normally physically intimidating. Freddy's a tiny, slight guy. He's agile. He's never really out in the light. And he's always cutting himself, showing that he doesn't care. He's going to torture you. He's going to have fun. He's not in it to kill you. He's going to kill you when he's ready. And the only time he's a bigger guy is when he decides to set him on fire. That stunt man, how much he looked like, Christmas Story when Ralphie's brother is like falling in the snow. It looked like a stuffed, like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man going up the stairs.
Yeah, I felt bad for the stunt guy who had to put up with that. But like the problem that I have with Freddy is that this is supposed to be a slasher movie. Gene, that's how you would describe this movie, is a slasher movie.
Absolutely.
The fact that he's like continually like cutting off his fingers or like peeling his face off or, cutting open and maggots falling out, like there's really no purpose for it other than to gross out the audience. That's why I really like the original Friday the 13th. The original one, it's his mom, right? So, spoiler alert. But the thing about, Jason and Jason's mom is that they're like unstoppable forces. They move slowly and you just have to like continually try and get away from them, but they're going to keep going. They're going to keep going. And that's kind of like what I like about zombie movies. In this one, it's like he's all over the place. I don't know really where he is. And maybe that's what they were going for. It just didn't come across to me as particularly scary.
You're taking away all hope from the kids. How can you dream of hurting Freddy worse than he hurts himself? He makes it a joke. What are you going to do? Am I going to cut your fingers off? Oh shit, he just did it to himself and they grew back.
But how does she pull him into the real world? There's no vortex, there's no gateway. What, you're just supposed to hold on to him and wake up?
That's exactly how you do it, because he can hurt you when you're sleeping. He's hurting you. So there's a crossing over there from the sleep world into the real world. And so if you're physically holding on to him, you can bring him back into the real world.
Wait a second, I just thought of something, guys. Were
the Matrix?
No, hold on. Hold on. Were the little kids that were jump roping supposed to be Nancy and Tina as kids?
No, where the hell did you get that from?
I think they're recollecting back to their childhood, jumping rope and singing this song. So if there's a neighborhood song about, then they had to have known about Freddy. It was just a legend.
So did Nancy grow up in the 50s? Wearing those white dresses and those shoes out there, doing hopscotch, and
that's right.
Wearing your roller skates.
I think this movie is set in the 50s. It's just like Porky's.
What?
It's a movie with time travel, but it's not.
That's right.
The main focus.
It's not a movie about time travel. It's just a movie that happens to have time travel in it. Freddy attacks Nancy once again, realizing he is powered by his victim's fear. She calmly turns her back on him, reducing him to nothingness. She steps outside into a bright morning where all of her friends and her mother are still alive. She gets into Glen's car to go to school when the top comes down, suddenly locks them in. As the car is driven uncontrollably down the street, Marge is grabbed through the window of their their door by Freddy's gloved hand, and she is dragged through it to her apparent death. End movie.
Okay, so again, we learned last week, creepy kids, nothing scarier. Those kids out there doing the famous chant, 1, 2, that is creepy, right? We need more of that, and we need less of things getting pulled into small holes. You had Johnny Depp sucked into his bed. It worked. But what about that cheesy-ass mannequin of Mom getting sucked through the tiny hole in the door?
That just speaks again to the whole fact that they wanted to make things surreal, that things aren't supposed to make sense. So yeah, it was a little cheesy, but the whole last sequence seemed like an add-on,
right?
Is what it looked like.
Well, actually, Wes Craven originally planned for the film to have a more evocative ending, where Nancy kills Krueger by ceasing to believe in him, then awakes to discover that everything that happened in the film was nothing but a nightmare. However, New Line's boss, Robert Shea, demanded a twist ending in which Krueger disappears and the film all appears to have been a dream, only for audience to discover that they are now watching a dream within a dream within a dream, where Fred reappears as a car and kidnaps Nancy and her friends, followed by Fred reaching through a window on the front door to pull Nancy's mother inside. So they actually filmed both, but what they ended up with, the theatrical release, was what Robert Shea wanted.
And this is why you don't give your studio execs cocaine, because shit like this happens. But I'm mad about this because I'd spent a lot of time thinking about what did I just see and how do I interpret the ending. And so what I thought was that Nancy survived, and now we've shifted into Marge's nightmare.
Right.
She's been pulled through the bed, Freddy finally getting his revenge. But instead, it sounds like it was just kind of like a butting of heads between Craven and Shea.
So if I can recommend How Is This Movie podcast and Dana Buckler.
Oh, great one.
I mean, he is a researcher. He is a true podcaster. He's what I'd like to be when I grow up. The research he does is great, and he did a special on the Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's great because he goes into the background of the battle with Wes Craven in the studio, and that Wes was so desperate to get this movie made that he gave some control to the studio. And that was why, in the end, they had to go with the ending that left it open for sequels. But give that a listen. It'll add, I think, an additional layer to our hijinks.
Yeah, it would have been a much cooler movie if it would have all just been a dream.
Right,
like, if it was all just a nightmare. That'd be great.
I agree. But so I had the same thought. We're watching Nancy's mom, and but what if it's Nancy's mom's dream the entire time?
She's the one who deserves to get punished.
Right,
exactly.
Right, she's the one that Freddy should have been going after the entire time. But also, like, what about the other moms? What about Tina's mom? What about Johnny Depp's mom, who just sat there and watched it? Is it that Freddy is just going after their kids of the parents that burned him? Like, I don't really understand his motivation.
Well, if you want to torture me, it's better to go after my daughter. There's nothing worse. I'd rather die. It's strange when you become a parent. All the thoughts that you have of self-preservation go out the window. If I saw a lion out in the middle of my yard, your normal intuition is run away. But if my daughter's there, I would, without hesitation, charge it. So if you want to really torture these parents, make them helpless to watch their kids go crazy and suffer.
One of the tips and tricks that the other neighborhood kids used to tell me to get over my scarediness, or the fact that I was afraid of these horror movies, is to always root for the villain. Did you guys ever use that tip or trick? Like watching horror movies as a kid, you would root for Freddy, you'd root for Jason, and that made him, in your mind, the hero.
I mean, I think I did it instinctually. I was never told to.
No, I do remember, though, with Friday the 13th, that I always associated with the campers because Jason never killed them.
Right.
So I felt safe. The second I became the age of the counselors, I didn't have that safety blanket anymore.
Right. Well, I mean, it feels like later on in the sequels of this movie, Freddy kind of became, and same with Jason in the sequels, they kind of became the protagonists. They kind of became the ones that you would root for versus the dumb kids who would do dumb shit like, go outside when they're yelling out, Gene!
I'm stealing your car, Gene.
I'm your boyfriend now.
I'm driving your truck, pussy.
Now's the time of the podcast where we break out our Shat meters and tell you how many wipes this movie is. If you've never listened to the podcast, 0 wipes is a perfect movie, and 5 wipes is the equivalent of a bed geyser of blood spewing all over your bedroom ceiling. That being said, Gene, how many wipes do you give this movie?
Despite some hammy acting, this movie really delivered in the imagination department. For me, it gave birth to a world that I loved for decades. I grew up with this franchise. I loved every single one of them. And it was an amazing bit of cinema shot for less than $2 million. Introduced us to a lot of stars and just a new way of watching horror movies. For me, it's a 2.5 wipes. Not flawless, but not terrible.
All right, I'm going to give this 4.5 wipes. The best thing about this movie is a movie poster. It's not a good movie. The acting is terrible. The direction is not fantastic. It feels like they had one soundstage, which they probably did, and they kept going back to it. This is not a good movie, guys. It's not good.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. It hurts me to say this because I loved it as a kid. I got to give it 3.5 wipes. I wasn't scared. It's iconic as a horror movie, and what they tried to do was cool, and Freddy was fun, and it was neat to watch. The positives are what they did with the budget was fantastic. The plot moves along. It didn't drag at all. But in the end, to me, it wasn't anything special. I'm not going to go back and watch it. Yes, it's iconic, but I have to at least be a little bit scared. And there wasn't any point where I was tense. I was more scared of the television set in the first 5 minutes of Poltergeist.
But I think what you guys have to give this movie credit for, though, is it's not truly a suspense or a thriller. It's a slasher flick, and a slasher flick is primarily it's teen sexual tension, gore, and hijinks. And I think that's what this movie had a ton of. You're not supposed to be afraid. You're not.
But they're not good hijinks. They're not. It's not great.
I mean, we just sat here in the prep for the show, though, and sat there and quoted the shit out of this movie. It's infinitely quotable. The scenes are memorable. I just can't believe you guys are being this hard on it.
So hold on. Give me comparable movies that fit your slasher bracket.
I would say Halloween, Friday the 13th. I would say those are the big ones. And then, if you want scary, like if you want where this verges on scary is when you get into like the Hellraiser movies. Like Hellraiser is where it goes into the scary part.
Yeah, but we talked about, Friday 13th, the final chapter. That shit's scary. There's times where Jason's chasing. That is the tension. There was none of that in here. Or Michael Myers.
Yeah, there's no jump scares. There's no. The point of this podcast, in my opinion, is to see if movies still hold up, or are they scary today? And this movie does not stand the test of time. Most people think that this is better than the remake, but still. This movie is not good, guys. By today's standards, kids would not be scared. They'd laugh at this movie.
Oh my God. I'd be curious to see if any of our listeners who are much younger than us see this and what they think of it. It looks like Class of Nukem High, The Toxic Avenger. It looks like that B schlock.
Yeah, it's definitely a B movie. Yeah.
This, to me, watching it, I don't think it's on the same level as Halloween now or Friday the 13th.
Yeah, I would love to do listen, I've never seen the final chapter of Friday the 13th. I would love to just compare notes because Friday the 13th is, from what I understand, still a pretty damn good movie, the original one.
The final chapter is good.
Is that? All right, all of our we add up all of our scores and divide by 3. That gives us a 3.5 average. 3.5 wipes is what we give this movie collectively. Big D, where does that put it on our list?
Okay, so give me a second here. So it's 3.5?
Mm-hmm.
Oof. Okay, so this, and again, I got to update. Unfortunately, I didn't add Poltergeist in there, but I think Poltergeist was like 3.66 repeating. So this is a little...
2.6 repeated.
Yeah, so this is what, 3.5?
3.5, yeah.
Woof. Okay. This is down now in the 36 hole between Batman and Twister.
That's fair.
That feels right.
Yeah, that's right.
That feels right. All right. Gene, do we have any shout-outs this weekend? What is a shout-out?
We do, Raj. Shout-outs are ways that you can support the podcast. We never have asked for money, but we have asked for your support. And just if you go to shatthemovies.com, scroll down to the shout-outs slider, it'll pop right out, and you put your name in there, and we'll read it right here on the podcast. This week's shout-outs go to Derek, Big Dave Balcom, and Billy Bob Dam. So thanks, guys, for listening, assuming you're all guys. Thanks for listening and showing your support through the shout-outs. If you'd like to hear your name read on the podcast, please go to shatthemovies.com, scroll down, find that slider, put your name in there, and we'll get you on next week.
That concludes this week's episode of Shat.
No, why don't we tell people what we're doing next week?
No, that's right. I forget. What are we doing next week?
So this is the first time I've kept this secret from you two. But what we have here is next week is one of those that when I put it onto the voting blocks, I post it and never really think that day will come, but that day has come. And it was recommended by one of our listeners. It is Bad Sequels.
Uh-huh.
In last place was the 1991 Highlander 2.
Thank God.
In second place was Speed 2, Cruise Control.
Ugh, even worse.
Really close here. In third place, Hot Shots Part 2.
Oh, come on, guys.
And the winner, it got 8 more votes than Hot Shots, was Predator 2.
Oh, God, come on. Let's do Can we do Hot Shots, please?
I am really excited about Predator 2.
Predator 2 is
a democracy.
In the urban setting.
Yes, this is Gary Busey's first film after he had that horrible motorcycle accident. It's bad.
Why are we doing
so
this?
Good.
Why aren't we doing Hot Shots Part 2 with the flaming chicken?
You should have campaigned.
All right.
People probably don't even remember what Hot Shots is.
Right.
Predator 2 is the
more
top
iconic
movie. It is the top movie among people who are fans of really gigantic handguns. So there's that.
Another plug for how is this movie, and Dana Buckler, he does the entire thing on the Predator franchise and series, and talks about this, and he goes into great depths and all that about how the behind the scenes of the making of this movie. So go check that out. How is this movie podcast? That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just follow @Shat the Movies. We're also on Facebook. You can like us there. Our website where you can get a shout out and all that stuff is shatthemovies.com. You can also vote for upcoming movies. Our email address to we get a lot of these on Twitter, guys. Asking us, why don't you do this movie? Email us, hosts@shatthemovies.com. There you can recommend a theme and a suggestion of 4 movie choices. We'll post that up on the website. We're everywhere. Fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That does help the podcast grow. Again, you can also check out our sister podcasts, Shat on TV, and all the spoilers, or real spoilers, rather, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Mr. Robot. You can check out all the information on those websites, Shat on TV and realspoilers.com. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Gene Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next week for our Predator 2 review. Thanks so much for listening. Take care, good night, and good luck.
But it was sweet when they killed Ellis, and with a little help